are Ms. Annalise Tour and Mr. Peter Brennan, and the community member is Ms. Alison Small. I'd ask the members of the panel to disclose any conflict of interest they may have in relation to each and every item on the agenda today. Any conflicts to be noted?
Mr. Chair, none from me.
None from me, unless to. However, with item 5, 42 Varna Street, Waverley, I was a member of the original panel that determined the application, and as this is a review application, I will not be taking part in that matter.
Thank you, Ms. Tour. I have no conflicts.
I have no conflicts, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Small. Well, then we'll start straight in on the agenda. I'd like to remind members of the public that to keep their submissions brief with the time limit of 3 minutes, which I'll, subject to questions, strictly observe. So the first matter is 92 Ramsgate Avenue, Bondi Beach, and there are 2 speakers registered to speak. The first one is Miss Robin Edwards. Is she present, please? Yes, you're waving at me. So, Miss Edwards, you are from apartment 2, number 90 Ramsgate Avenue. You're muted, I think.
Hello, can you hear me?
Better. That's better. Now I can hear you too.
Okay, good.
So I said you're from 90 Ramsgate Avenue, apartment 2, unit 2.
That's right, yeah.
Yes. Please go ahead with your submission.
Okay, hi everyone. Thanks a lot for the opportunity to say a few words. Promise I'll be brief. Look, you probably received the letter that I sent to council on the 3rd of October, which was, my comments about the DA modification. So I won't go into all that because hopefully people have had a quick read. Yes. Excellent. In my my 3 minutes, I just wanted to raise 3 brief points that really go with that letter. The first point is that after I wrote that letter on the 3rd of October, Ranald Cogan, who was the owner of the development next door at 92, rang me totally out of the blue in October, demanding that I withdraw that letter to council regarding the DA modification that was currently before council. So I was quite taken aback, and I actually refused to do that, saying that everything that I wrote in that letter was true. And I still hold that everything I did write in that letter was true. So that's the first point that I want to make. The second point that I'd like to make, which is outlined a little bit in my letter, so again, I'll be brief, is that the development has caused serious, when I say serious, I'm saying they're not, it's serious cracking. They're not hairline cracks. They're 5mm cracks throughout all rooms of my older style unit, where I've lived for 32 years. So you can appreciate that this is a really important home for me as an age pensioner. It's part of my security. So because of the cracking, Martinez Builders were initially receptive, and they did repair the very, very bad cracking in my lounge room and bathrooms around August last year. So I want to emphasise this, that this was August last year. And I think it was considered by Martinez and the engineer that this was potentially a safety issue. The cracking was so bad in the lounge room. Okay, so I was thrilled. They repaired it. I felt great. I'm getting my home back. But since then, despite my continual pleas, the cracking has not been repaired in any of the other rooms. Even though the owner, and this is what really galls me and why I thought, yes, I'd like to talk today, even though the owner, Ranald Cogan, runs his own local painting business, so it would be a very easy and quick job for them to fill and paint the cracking that they have caused, and they've acknowledged that in my unit. For me, as an age pensioner, it's galling that I was forced to repair the cracking in my own spare rental room just to help with a little bit of income at one stage. I made a terrible job of it, and I thought, I can't do it anymore. I'm going to have to wait for, the professionals to do their job. My third point, and this is a request that I'd like to put to the committee, and it goes to, I suppose you'd call it some sort of conditional approval of the DA modification. And I'd like to ask the committee to consider that the DA modification only be approved after S Building has done the right thing, after they've filled and painted the cracking in my unit. And I want to emphasize, oh, hello. Can you hear me? Because I seem to have disappeared.
No,
Can you hear me? Oh, okay. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I'll keep talking. Okay. And
but
I've
only
nearly
for 3 minutes, though.
So again, I want to ask that council give conditional approval for this DA that only be approved after S Building have filled and painted the cracking in my unit. It's a small job which could be completed in a couple of days. I think this is a very modest request. And finally, I've been living with the cracking since last August. I should not have to beg local businesses, Kogan and Sons and S Building to do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of Ms Edwards from the members of the panel?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Brennan?
I'm sorry, I can't really hear that something's happened. I need to increase the volume.
Okay. When the application was originally approved, I presume there was a condition requiring the applicant to do a dilapidation report. Was a dilapidation report carried out in respect to your building and photographed and all that type of thing?
Look, I'm sorry, I can't hear you. You're not mute, but I can't hear you. Let me try to put the volume up on my machine. Oh, okay, I think that's, yep, all right. Sorry, so I might have to ask if you repeat. Thank you.
Yeah. Are you aware if a dilapidation report or audit was carried out in respect to your building and a copy of that dilapidation report provided to you or to the owners corporation?
Yes, no, the dilapidation report was done prior to any of the demolition and excavation. I've got a copy of that. And yeah, look, the Martin F builders, they have been, you know, well, at the beginning, I think fairly decent, and they've acknowledged that the cracking was caused by their development. So that's not really an issue. The dilapidation report shows it very clearly that, yeah, okay, the cracking was caused by the development next door. It's the actual fixing of that cracking. They've never said they won't do it.
We understand.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Ms Edwards. Mr Brian Myerson, present, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr Chair. I'm the architect representing the applicant.
Yes.
And thank you, panel. I'll be very brief. Just regarding Robin's concerns, I would obviously urge my client and the builder, Martin F, to do their obligations, to carry out their obligations in terms of the dilapidation report and repair any damage that they're responsible for. And that's obviously going to be an ongoing thing. There will, I think, they will ascertain that. The engineers will determine what's different from what's changed from the dilapidation report, and I'm sure and I will obviously encourage them to attend to that. And as Robin said, Martin's a very well-known builder in the area, and he'll want to obviously fulfill his obligations. But just coming back to the planning report, my client has read the report and understood it, and I think he's accepted the assessment of the planning officers, and we're happy for the panel to continue and ascertain their opinion on this report. From our point of view, we've got no issues to raise about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Myerson. Are there any questions of Mr Myerson from the panel?
Yes, I've got a question. Just in relation to, as I understand that there's a condition, I think it's condition 3, that requires surrendering of the original consent. I just want to clarify that my understanding of what's proposed is this DA is essentially alterations and additions and a change of use to your original DA.
Yes.
So the two DAs will need to coexist. Is that correct?
Well, that's But you've said that there's a condition that it's
Condition
surrendered.
3, Mr. Myerson, suggests that the first consent from 2019 should be surrendered.
Yes, I understand that. So that obviously, Ms. Tour, if that's surrendered, there'll only be one DA that's alive, so to speak. Is that your question?
Well, it's just that, as I understand, that this DA is not for the actual building, which has been approved under the previous one. It's for alterations to that and a change of use.
Yes.
So all of that previous work, which is under the 19 consent, was approved under that consent, and that consent would need to remain.
Well, that would be probably the preference. We would be happy with that if that was the case.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So at the conclusion of the public meeting, we will adjourn and consider this and the other applications and notify our decision on the council website as soon as may be possible. Thank you to the speakers. We move then to Unit 15, 7 Francis Street, Bondi Beach. And there's one speaker registered to speak, and that's Mr. Josh Grossman. Is he?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
And you're representing the applicant.
I am the applicant.
You are the applicant. Yes. Yes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and panel members. I've read through, obviously, the assessment report and council's comments. Council obviously quite aggressively opposed the application, which is fine. Excuse my ignorance in asking this, but essentially we had come up with 2 pathways moving forward. So pathway 1 would be to prepare an amended set of architectural plans that would delete the balcony and the proposed dormers on both sides, which would obviously heavily reduce the proposed scope and would almost appease all of Joe Somerville's kind of objections in his assessment report. And where I say, excuse my ignorance, is there an opportunity to submit an amended architectural plan to the panel to make a decision on, or would we simply accept a refusal of the application and then lodge a Division 8.2 review of determination with the amended set through that avenue?
Well, we're not here to give advice to applicants, but we don't usually go along with deferments unless there's very good reason. So I think if we do refuse it, your best avenue is 8.2 review.
Okay, understood.
It's up to you to decide.
Yeah, that's well, I kind of expect it's going to be refused, so we'd obviously ultimately go down the 8.2 path. That's all.
Okay. Any questions of Mr. Grossman from the panel?
No, I don't.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
So we will move on then to 11 Gilgandra Road, North Bondi. There's a number of speakers, including Lorraine Fisher. Is she present, please? Lorraine Fisher from number, is it number 9 Gilgandra Road? Is Rosalina, are you able to tell me whether Lorraine Fisher is in the room or not? Well, we'll assume that she's not.
Can't see her in the room.
Not. Okay,
No.
thank you. And then the speakers for the applicant, the first one is Eli Gashite. Is he present? Eli? All right, what about Bob Myerson? I mean, Myersons are taking over today. Is Mr. Bob Myerson present? Well, nobody's present of the speakers. Can you confirm that, Rosalina? Well, we'll deal with the matter at the close of the public meeting and notify our decision on the council website. We move on then to 42 Varna Street. Have I gone over? I
Mr.
have.
Chair,
We should come to the Phillip House in Bronte Road. And there are a number of speakers here. Firstly, there is representatives from the Charing Cross Village Precinct, Danny Coretti and Maura Main.
Yes, I'm here.
I'm here too.
Oh, good. Who wants to speak first? Mr. Coretti?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay.
Thank you, Maura. Thank you, Maura.
Please go
Okay.
ahead.
Good afternoon, panel. I've lived in Charing Cross for the past 42 years, and I'm the DA rep for Charing Cross Village Precinct. I also live 2 doors down from this facility, so I'm very familiar with it. Essentially, we have a nursing home with 67 beds that is being lost in this proposal. We are losing a facility that cares for those who cannot care for themselves, instead providing a boarding house that is purportedly for the aged. If it is to be a boarding house for over 55s, then conditions of consent must ensure that it is exactly what it becomes. The danger here is that it eventually becomes micro apartments for young professionals, tourists or backpackers, and becomes something completely different than its original intended use. Therefore, we agree with the condition that the building is to be operated as an aged care facility, accommodating only over 55s and consisting of single occupants in self-contained rooms. However, should the property be sold, we would like this condition to be embodied in its future use, so it can never be adapted for anything else than its intended purpose for the aged. We know from the Bondi Beach Precinct group that many of these so-called boarding houses turn into micro apartments for single professionals who can afford to rent regular apartments, or indeed become boarding for backpackers. They become antisocial, turn into party houses for the affluent when they were supposed to be established as affordable accommodation for singles. Further, we believe that 100% of this property must be allocated to affordable housing as assessed under Waverley Council affordable housing policy and provided for those who can least afford it. Is this not what boarding houses are designed for? Affordable accommodation for those who can least afford it. We do not agree that this building should go over 9.5 metre height limits that define the Charing Cross Conservation Area. Charing Cross is uniquely low rise. These heights are embodied in the LEP and are currently and constantly being challenged by increasing development, applications and rezonings by those who seek to profit by going up. If the council keeps granting here and there these exceptions, they are eroding the height limits that makes this area special. These limits will eventually be abandoned as the proponent has described in its application as developments keep going higher and higher. A line must be drawn in the sand. Future developers jump on these approvals and will say, well, if they've been able to do it, why can't I? This is the same rationale the proponent has used in this case in relation to its neighbour, St Catherine's School. We therefore get a domino effect across the locality, and the unique character of the local area, which is currently preserved, is challenged and lost. We therefore recommend the reduced height to 9.5 metres, staying within the height levels as required in the Waverley LEP for Charing Cross Conservation Area.
Thank you, Mr. Coretti. Any questions of Mr. Coretti from the panel? All right, and Maura Main, do you wish to address us?
Yes, please, Mr. Chair, and I won't go over what Danny's already so well articulated. Thank you very much for listening. I'm really disappointed with this proposal on a number of grounds. Firstly, from an environmental perspective. Secondly, from the reduced true aged care accommodation perspective, as Danny so eloquently described. And thirdly, from a design perspective. So I'll briefly go through that. The environmental credentials are quite deficient. There's for example, there's no recycling of the existing fabric. There's almost full site excavation for car parking. There's a lack of natural ground, or deep soil as it's called, for gardens and trees. There's no cross ventilation for most units, so it's air condition dependent, and several units don't even have balconies. The appearance bears no relationship to the heritage context, which I think is disappointing, but given that that's been abandoned altogether, it would have been good to see a really good biophilic or other environmental design. We all know that indoor-outdoor space and how aged care has suffered through the pandemic from lack of natural ventilation, from people having to be locked up. It is this proposal is not best practice. I mean, the building might work somewhere in Balkan Hills where you can look out of the window and see trees, but here in overcrowded Waverley, it's really not a very good model. As Danny has said, I mean, the design excellence, I'll just briefly say that the frontage, which is a couple of square boxes now put on the front elevation, resembles the Coogee Surf Life Saving Club, which Peter will may or may not agree with me, is locally known as the microwave. So it's a pity that we're getting a style that really isn't Waverley specific or Coogee specific. I would like to ask you, please, to include in the recommendations that DA compliance inspections, there's a requirement that the plan of management for operation is lodged with council every 2 years. And I would like to request that the panel puts on that council inspects at the time of lodgement. So it's not just something that's lodged, that council actually has some sort of ongoing relationship. I would like to ask you if there is any protection for existing residents, whether they can be rehoused within, say, a 5K radius. I would like you to make sure that there's no gas heating or cooking or other appliances, that it's all renewable, that EV charging is put in the basement car parking, and there are gates put on the entry driveway from Bronte Road so that we don't have to look at the undercroft. And ideally that all rooms have balconies with openable windows. Otherwise, they're locked in the envelope. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Main. Any questions of Ms. Main? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, I think the first speaker for the applicant is Nick Weinberg or Winberg.
Hi, Chair. I'm here. Thank you.
Yes. And your position, Mr. Winberg, to the applicant, are you the applicant?
Summit Care is the aged care operator that's the proponent. I'm their representative.
Right. Please go ahead.
I'd like to thank the panel for their time today, and thank you to Maura and Danny. We take on your comments. Certainly there are some comments there that I can see the concern around it being firstly, I'd like to say the concern around it being a boarding house. For us, it's an application necessity because we're in a heritage conservation zone. If we could redevelop the property under the seniors SEP as an aged care hostel, which is its full intention, as what it's intended to be, we would have, but we're unable to under the planning regulations, so we had to go via the other route. The intent is fully and completely for it to be a seniors development. We have a large car park by virtue of the fact that we can't use the concessions under the seniors development standards that would allow us to have less excavation. So that we're sort of pinned by a few different things. We would like to, I think, firstly, I'd like to personally give thanks and commendation to the town planner from Waverley Council, who has been very constructive and open with us throughout the assessment. We've made several changes on their recommendations. One more, I would say, is we had more balconies, but we were asked to have them removed for privacy concerns. So the balance there is we understand different things and different people want different things in the building, but we have to go with the advice we received from council and the relevant departments within council, and that's driven some of those changes. Look, we have no issue with the conditions as they stand, and certainly the plan of management for the development, we would consider that it would be fully acceptable and appropriate if council were to come every 2 years and inspect, no problem at all. As to the internal design and some management of airflow and other things, there are various different ways to manage them, but through the pandemic, I won't go into each individual item, but certainly we are very cognizant of making sure that, that it's a healthy environment and we do our level best with design. Sometimes we are stuck with the realities of what we have to do with airflow management and safety and Australian standards. So we work with it as best we can, but we've certainly made every effort that we could to bring the height of the building down. So far, I think we only breached the height with the roof form or the roof ridge, which was really driven by the heritage consultant who dictated that we have a roof ridge rather than a flat concrete roof. And obviously our lift overrun, which sticks up there, that's an unavoidable necessity. So we thank the panel for your consideration. We don't really seek to change anything or have any issues with concerns around it being a seniors housing development as conditioned in the conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Winberg. Are there any questions of this gentleman from the panel?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of questions, Mr. Winberg. In the report, and you've also referred to being essentially a seniors development, in the report it talks about nursing and medical care being available 24/7, yet I can't see anywhere on the plan where there's a nurse's station or any room or suite for a doctor or a nurse. Could you comment on that firstly?
So, Summit Care, the operator, has several facilities around Sydney, and certainly the closest facility, which is also under consideration for redevelopment, is Summit Care Randwick. Also, we've recently had a new facility, a large full-scale residential aged care facility approved at Monterey, down at near Brighton Le Sands, which is a large residential aged care facility. Summit Care as an organisation is looking to renew all of its stock, and we've been working with Summit Care over the last few years to seek approval to redevelop all of their buildings. And as we redevelop them, different sites will be supported by other sites. So Summit Care Randwick is less than 2 kilometres away, which will be a full service residential aged care facility. And as part of the long-term redevelopment plans of the wider Summit Care aged care portfolio of buildings, it would be supported both with laundry, with kitchen, with doctors, with nursing staff as necessary. Now, we do have a manager's room, an office there, but realistically, the staff and support will come from Summit Care Randwick, not far away on Frenchman's Road.
But that nursing or medical staff won't have a station or a room or whatever to operate. They'll just have to come from another premises.
Any consultation would typically be done inside the room or in the office.
Okay. Now you said that essentially you wanted to do a seniors development, but the planning pathway meant that you could only go down the path under the affordable housing.
That's by virtue of the fact that it is a heritage conservation zone. There is an exclusion as to using the senior SEP.
But that SEP doesn't impose any restriction on you as far as affordability or age. So if the
we do have condition 2 though, which we
condition 2. Okay, so you accept condition 2?
We do.
Okay.
I have a question. I have a question with the front balconies that I would like to see a planter box around the edge, because I feel like there's not much greenery from the street frontage. Do you have an issue with that?
You mean on the uppermost level or in the, yep?
Well, on all the front balconies, there's 3 of them.
Yeah, we would have no issue with more greening. We would always seek to do it. So no question whatsoever, no issue.
And also the only other thing was the detail with the lift and the stair, that you've just got grills. I was just thinking aesthetically there might be another way of doing that. Have you looked at that?
Look, I'm not the architect. I'm sure there would be. There's a lot of what you see in the development elevations and the size and the tightness of the building compared to the original submission comes from feedback from council, and also a lot of toing and froing between council and our architects. So I'm loath to jump in there and tell them where they're right or wrong, but as you know, I'm neither of those representatives on the project, but certainly we'd be happy to look at alternative treatments and facades and things, but it's we will submit that to the panel if that's something you'd want to recommend.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
My
Winberg.
question.
Is Mr. Tom Cook wish to speak, Mr. Winberg?
And is he?
Yes. So, Mr. Cook, please. Mr. Tom Cook, I can see his name on the screen.
Yes. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. I won't. Yeah, I think Nick has covered off the majority of those queries by the panel and also the community members. So I won't take up too much of your time. I just like to reiterate. Obviously, this DA and the design has been subject to a number of reviews by both council staff members and also the design excellence panel. And as Nick said, there's been a number of concessions made throughout, including to the bulk and scale of the development and the height as well, which there is a minor encroachment to the height, but that has been done in consultation with council and the design excellence panel to achieve what has been considered an acceptable outcome. Again, just in relation to the ongoing use of the development, obviously, as Nick said, there is condition 2, which provides a mechanism to ensure that it would only be used for over 55s, notwithstanding the application being under the affordable rental housing SEP. So we do believe that provides appropriate certainty that it would be continue to be used as residential aged care.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Cook from the panel?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. Is Macone Planning present?
That is myself, Mr. Chair.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Mr. Cook. All right. So I think we've heard all the speakers. So at the conclusion of the public meeting, we will adjourn and consider this application and notify our decision on the council website. Now I'm going to go, I've called the matters in the wrong order. So I'm going to go back to 11 Gilgandra Road because I see that some of the speakers are present. So I'm going to call it again. This is 11 Gilgandra Road. First speaker is Lorraine Fisher, an objector. Is she present?
She's not present, Chair. She sent in a submission.
Okay, thank you. Then Eli Gescheit, the planner. I saw his name on the screen.
Good afternoon.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Good. Now, you're the planner representing the applicant.
Correct. I'm a project architect, Rob Myerson. Now, I won't take too much more of your time. Now, we've reviewed the report by Council's assessing officer. It's a comprehensive report, so we do appreciate their time and efforts. We've also reviewed the conditions of consent, and naturally we concur with them, and we've got no questions or issues with the report. However, I'm here with the architect, as I said, so we are here if there's any questions from the panel.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the panel for Mr. Gescheit? Okay. Well, we'll come to Mr. Bob Myerson, the architect.
Hi, Chair. I have nothing to add to what our planner Ellie added, just here to answer any questions if need be.
Right, thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Bob Myerson from the panel?
Yeah, you're quite happy to redesign the roof over the front section of the addition from a gable to a hip end?
Correct. Yeah, we had some discussions with the council on that, and we understand the concern. So happy to review that and look into that.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Myerson. Thank you, Mr. Gescheit. So at the conclusion of the public meeting, we will adjourn and consider this application and notify our decision on the council website. We move on then to the next item on the agenda, which I hope I'm right, and if I turn the page properly, is 42 Varner Street, Waverley. And the speaker I have is Mr. Scott Barwick.
Mr. Chair, I'll excuse myself from this matter.
Okay, that's noted. Ms. Tua will not sit on this matter. So is Mr. Scott Barwick present, please? I can see his name on the screen.
I am, Mr. Chair. I'll stay off camera because I have a very, very sketchy connection, so I won't risk it. Sorry about that.
We can hear you, so please go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
You're the planner
Also on
the applicant.
That's correct. No, online is Ben and Hannah Galvin are the applicants. Hopefully you received the written submission that was sent through on Monday, where we have put forward a request for a number of things. Well, one major thing is about the option of a deferral to allow the provision of amended plans to delete the basement. It seems from the reading of the assessment report that the 4.6 objection that relates to the FSR arising from the basement and the excavation is a matter of considerable concern to the assessment planner. While I disagree that that there is not a merit for the 4.6 submission in terms of moving forward with the achievement of the accommodation on behalf of the applicant, that is something that is proffered. That, as I said, would result in a compliant FSR and removes the question of excavation. On the point of excavation, I do note that the assessment report indicates that the depth of the excavation is up to 2.6, 2.7 metres, whereas that has failed to consider that actually there's about a metre of subfloor already below the existing ground level. So when you relate the finished ground level of the front yard to the proposed floor of the basement, the depth is 1.59 metres. So it's significantly less than indicated. The other reasons for refusal that are readily resolved in relation to the car park in the location of the bin stores, as indicated in Council's traffic comments that form part of the report. A relocation of that bin from the end of the driveway, end of the car parking space, rather to the side of the car parking space would allow a compliant depth, something that's readily achieved. Sorry. In relation to the non-compliance of the landscaped area, we've rechecked the calculation, and the 3 areas of deep soil landscaping do achieve the 15% requirement of Council's DCP. So we question that reason for refusal. The final then matter is the relationship, and that formed the basis of the submission that was provided to the panel members. There is a number of approvals long standing, large terraces with
Mr. Barwick,
boundaries.
Mr. Barwick,
numerous examples of corner
Mr.
which have two-story
can you hear me? Mr. Barwick, can you?
The application on impact of the. I can hear you.
You were breaking up in the last couple of sentences.
Yes, I can.
But it's okay now, so. It's okay now.
Are you able to hear me again now, Chair? I'm in the well-serviced regions today.
We are able to hear you now. Yeah, please finish up your submission.
Sorry. The last presentation in the submission that was provided, there are numerous examples of buildings of a similar scale in the locality, and we disagree that the proposal would be out of character with the locality as contended. With the request that we put forward in terms of deleting the basement, therefore removing the FSR non-compliance and the excavation, it would seem that an appropriate way forward for the application at this stage. Thank you, Chair. And as I said, the applicants are available for questions should you wish.
Thank you, Mr. Barwick. Are there any questions of Mr. Barwick from the panel?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Barwick. One of the areas that also seems to be of concern to the council is the elevated walkway and the use of the roof over the garage as a deck, and then the resultant impact on neighbours and a very, very high wall on much of the eastern boundary. eastern common boundary. Would you like to comment on that? And
Certainly. The scheme that's been put forward for the 8.2 review has provided a buffer, a 900, just over 900 millimetre landscape buffer. So it has addressed concerns of privacy in relation to setting in that, that elevated area. It provides a great amenity to the potential occupants, future occupants of the dwelling, because by its elevated nature, it gets excellent solar access. And by virtue of the relationship to the adjoining property and the orientation of the site, we're not causing unacceptable overshadowing impact to the adjoining development, the adjoining semi, which we note is undeveloped at this stage. And in relation to the relationship that would be set up, this proposal, it does not, in our opinion, diminish the opportunity for that dwelling to be also appropriately redeveloped in the future with an appropriate level of privacy, protection of overlooking and avoidance of overshadowing to the adjoining property.
okay, thank you, Mr. Barwick.
Any further questions of Mr. Barwick? All right. Now, the owners and the project manager from the architect's office are available for questioning if any of the members of the panel wish to hear them.
I don't have any comments.
Mr. Brennan?
No, Mr. Chair.
All right. Well, we won't call on them. Thank you very much, Mr. Barwick. So we'll consider this application at the close of the public meeting and notify our decision on the council website as soon as may be possible. Thank you for your submission.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We move then to 259 Military Road, Dover Heights. Now, there was one speaker registered, and that was Mr. John Hatch. He may have some problems attending, I understand, but can we just call Mr. John Hatch from JMH Living Design? Is he present?
Yes, I am.
Oh, good. Thank you. We weren't quite sure whether you were going to make it or not.
Yes, I didn't know whether I was going to make it either.
Well, you have, and we're pleased. So please go ahead with your submission.
Yeah, my name is John Hatch. Thank you, panel. Yeah, my name is John Hatch. I'm the applicant for the project, and I suppose I was probably just supporting the planning assessing officer's recommendation for approval, and I have found the assessment process with council's planner quite good, and that's about all I've got to say. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you very much. There may be some questions from the members of the panel. So I wonder if Miss Tour is back with us.
Yes, I am.
Oh, good.
And I did have a question just in relation to the upper level. It's projecting forward of the adjoining semi. Just the sort of logic behind that and why it's acceptable in terms of the streetscape.
On the street boundary side?
Yeah. I think it's where it's that, is it bedroom 3? Sorry, wait a minute, I have to look at the plan.
And it chops into that front roof over
the carport, yeah.
Yeah. I might just open up my version of the design, if that's okay.
Yeah, it's bedroom 2 at the front over the carport. So your ground level lines up with the adjoining semi. So bedroom 1 lines up, but when you go to the upper level, it's projecting forward.
Yeah,
my understanding.
I'm just opening up at the moment. Yeah, I think what we looked at when we were doing it was aligning the upper floor addition with the rear of the existing adjoining semi-detached. And what we were looking at with the front of the building was aligning with the ground floor below in terms of height, or in terms of extending up the front facade of what was the ground floor and just sort of continuing it straight up.
Yeah, I don't understand. So the ground floor, bedroom 1, it seems to line up with the adjoining semi.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
So you're saying it goes straight up, but...
Sorry, I'm incorrect, sorry. Hang on, I'm just...
Yeah, no, it doesn't. It projects out.
Yeah, I think you're correct in that it does project further forward. I suppose what we're probably looking at the time was sort of stepping the front facade, but also I suppose looking at the floor space that the clients were looking at in terms of bedroom areas and the like. And I suppose that's probably the main reasons behind that area sort of stepping further forward. So yeah, it's probably a combination of articulation and a sort of looking at the floor space options, but at the same time taking into consideration that the adjoining semi-detached does have an aspect across the rear of the property as well.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hatch. Are there any further questions of Mr. Hatch from the panel? Thanks, Mr. Hatch. Thank you for attending. So at the conclusion of the public meeting, we will adjourn and consider this and the other matters before us and notify our decision on the council website as soon as we may be possible. We move on then to 232 Military Road, Dover Heights. And the first speaker, I think, is Mr. Tony Moody. Is he present?
Yes, Chair. Tony Moody here.
Yes, and your planner representing the objector at 175 Military Road?
Yes, Chair and panel members.
Yes, please go ahead.
My name is Tony Moody. I'm a consultant planner. I should firstly acknowledge that the proposed modified development is lower than the approved development. My clients enjoy views across the subject site. One could say, why then should my clients and myself raise objection? The original approved development made some serious flaws in its assessment, not by the current author, I should say, Kylie Lucas. One of the flaws is that, as indicated by figure 4 and 5 in your report, the assessment officer at that time said the compliant front facade is causing the view loss. You will definitely see that that's not the case. It's the rear western facade which is causing the view loss. That's clear and unequivocal. You will note that the approved development also obliterated views of the Sydney Opera House in circumstances where it was a breaching western facade, and I must stress that. Even the modified development is a breaching western facade, and you're being asked to support the proposed development. And with respect, I consider that you are entitled to review not the previous decision, but the fact of whether that western facade height is reasonable in terms of view loss. Figure 5 indicates the view loss from my client's sunroom. It is not a study, it's approved as a sunroom. And it is the only room which has these views. My respectful submission is that's habitable, it's an important living room, and the view loss is from a continuing breaching development. And it's the only view. the DCP places particular weight on a habitable room. So what you essentially have before you is a non-compliant Western facade which creates views. Potentially, unfortunately, without height poles, we've never been able to truly establish the extent of view loss. I should add the previous report said that it was a moderate impact on figure 4. I'd call it severe, but even if one adopts a moderate impact, as you're keenly aware, tenacity states that even a moderate impact may be unacceptable. My clients and myself, professionally, do not wish to have a refusal of this application. There is absolutely no doubt the aesthetics, at least of the front facade, is more reasonable. We are merely seeking a lowering of the proposed roof to a level of 83.09, RL 83.09, which is a level of the roof of the approved development. And we're asking for an additional parapet of 200 millimeters, which is a parapet level of the proposed roof, proposed parapet, with a total RL maximum of 83.29. That gives enormous opportunity to create, if they wish, internal floor ceilings. May I just have 1 more minute, Chair?
Be brief, though, please.
We just wish to lower the height to 83.29 for the roof and for the parapet, my apologies, and 83.09 for the roof. The other thing is, please impose a condition regarding dull, non-reflective colours and materials of the roof. There will be no loss of floor space, no loss of yield, and the adjoining owners, the applicants, will still enjoy panoramic, unobstructed views. My clients and myself are merely seeking an equitable view sharing. Many thanks.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Moody from the members of the panel?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Obviously, I'll check later, but if it was reduced, if we were minded of imposing that condition, what reduction in height would that achieve?
It's approximately 0.4 meters compared to the proposed and 0.3 compared to the approved. That's my
so 300 to 400.
Yeah, and you will note, panel member Brennan, there's ample opportunity. You see the garage. There's ample opportunity that, if required, it could be lowered because it's not a steep grade, and there will be no loss of floor space. I should add, the applicant says on the western facade, the most western extent over the balcony has been dropped, claiming that there will improvement in views. I don't think that's the case, because you are looking at my clients looking down. I suspect it's the actual parapet of the main roof that's a springing point for the view loss. But nonetheless, we're not asking to prejudice the living floor space nor the internal amenity. We just want some more equitable sharing of views, particularly compared to the approved development. Thank you.
Any further questions of Mr. Moody? Thank you, Mr. Moody.
Thank you. My apologies, I must leave urgently. I can't stay around.
You're excused, so don't hang around. Thank you very much. Now, is Mr. Lee Cosnetta present?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Cosnetta, you're the planner representing the applicant.
I am, thank you, Chair. And can I first just say that during Mr. Moody's presentation, I was listening until the request for non-reflective materials, at which point my Zoom meeting restarted. Well, I regained access when there was discussion about the western elevation and height, but I do believe I understand Mr. Moody's concerns.
Can I just maybe assist him, because I'm not quite sure what you heard and what you didn't hear.
Thank you.
I don't know whether you heard him say that he would be seeking further reduction of height of the roof to RL 83.09 and 83.29 for the parapet. I think that, Mr. Brennan, is that correct?
Yes, that's how I read it, yeah.
To protect the view loss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did have those numbers. It may have been that
Good.
Mr. Moody was summarising in my absence.
Okay, thank you. Please go.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Kylie Lucas and Council officers for a comprehensive and favourable report. We endorse the recommendation to approve the application and all of the conditions associated with it. The purpose of this application is to modify an existing approval that allows for the construction of a 3-storey dwelling with a basement car park and a rooftop terrace to now suit the needs of new owners and a refreshed architectural style. During the design development process, the scope for the project team was always dictated by ensuring the amended design resulted in no additional impacts on surrounding properties, improved the amenity of the dwelling and the contribution it made to the streetscape. Firstly, the approved rooftop terrace was deleted altogether. This is above the RLs suggested by Mr. Moody and is no longer there. Those elements of the awkward approved roof profile with various parapet heights, planter boxes and balustrades was entirely removed and replaced with a simplified roof form that's entirely non-trafficable. The building has also then been lowered as compared to its approval, improving view sharing over the site from properties across the road, including Mr. Mooney's client's side. The remainder of the changes occur within the approved building footprint, with the exception of the front of the building where the alignment's bring forward in accordance with the controls. Considered altogether against the approval, this application offers an opportunity to provide improved compliance against all controls. Wall height, landscaping, the deep soil has been doubled, improved compliance with the car parking ramps and privacy controls, and we've reduced the extent of excavation by 20%. The officer's report acknowledges that the modifications we're seeking offer an improved view sharing outcome for the properties across the road and improved compliance generally. The building's almost a storey lower than its immediate neighbour to the north, and it's lowered further in this application. Council have reviewed the view sharing attributes of this application now on 2 separate different occasions. Some of the original report is copied into this report, and in both cases it's concluded it meets the tenacity principles. The report concludes there's no other adverse impacts arising, so I'd encourage the panel to accept the positive outcomes from the report, and I welcome any questions. I want to, in particular, if I can, Mr. Chair, just respond directly to some of the comments from Mr. Moody and some of those RLs. It's important to note this is not a speculative modification application. There is currently an approved building under construction on the site, and the construction program is carrying on, whether it be the larger, taller, less compliant building or the one that we're proposing here. Firstly, the tenacity principles don't suggest that because a building could be lowered, if there's some room within ceiling heights, that it must. The test is whether a more skillful design could provide the applicant with the same potential amenity and reduce the impact on the views of the neighbours. On the first question, this is a more skillful design. That's been the whole point of the lowered height and roof plane and the cleared roof without the roof terrace. Without it, we have a previous design under construction with worse impact. And on the second part of that question, it balances providing the applicant with the same amenity with reducing impact on views. Any lowering of the building would affect the amenity of the applicant, and it would not reduce the impact on views. For applicant amenity, the ceiling heights aren't overly generous and the building heights substantially lower than both neighbours. Lowering the building in any way would have a substantial impact on the amenity of the applicant. It would detrimentally impact the views potentially from the levels within the building. It would increase the shadows cast onto it from the building to the north. It would be essentially incongruous with both neighbours on either side, which are almost a floor taller than it. And lowering the ground floor level in particular would remove the ability to relocate the car garage from the large approved basement to the ground floor level, which is a very particular component of this application to reduce the excavation by 20%. On the contrary, for reducing the views, for the view sharing analysis in the report demonstrates lowering the building even more won't provide any improvement of iconic views, which aren't already available in this design. Because we've lowered the building, there's a full view of the Harbour Bridge instead of a partial view. There'll be an unlocking of the Sydney Opera House views, where currently there's none. And there will be an improvement to the city skyline view with the lower sections of all the city skyscrapers in full view, along with the rolling hills in front of it. And there's no further CBD views to gain. There is no further improvement available. And contrary to Mr. Moody's suggestion, the rear parapet is being lowered as well to a lower level than the main roof, which again is lowered from the approval. On balance with that amenity test in tenacity, I think this satisfies the view sharing principles. That's been accepted now by council on 2 occasions. And so, no, I don't accept the RLs put forward by Mr. Moody.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cosnetta. Are there any questions for Mr. Cosnetta from the panel?
I've got a couple of questions just in terms of clarifying some of these levels. So when I look at the sections on page DA 200, and it's unfortunately it's very hard for me to read because it's quite small, but it looks as if the level 1 finished floor level that was approved is 80.170, and what's proposed is also 80.170. So there's been no change to the floor level, but the roof level, as I understand it, of what was approved is 83.090, but what's proposed is 83.474. Is that correct?
That's correct. And the impact that Mr. Moody was talking about on views, as he rightly suggested, is from the western elevation and the parapet that continues above those levels. The parapet in the previous application was 83.7, above which was planter boxes and a balustrade. All components of our application to date are below that level.
Yeah, but just in terms of what I'm trying to clarify is that the floor to ceiling height of the upper level has increased.
That's correct.
Yeah.
In some areas, that's correct, yes.
Okay. By about 300 millimetres.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, so if the panel were to accept Mr. Moody's lowering, there would be no change to the amenity of those rooms that had been previously approved.
That's correct, but the purpose of the application is to increase the amenity of this applicant's home without any adverse impacts on the neighbours, which we've done. That would be of no additional benefit. And if those ceiling heights were retained with respect, I suspect the preference would be to have the rooftop terrace on top to add additional amenity. That's a component that we're removing from the proposal. We're also removing significantly higher parapet heights than currently under construction. So on balance, I don't think that's a necessary condition from the panel. It also wouldn't provide any material change to the iconic views that are obtained over this property.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It appears to me, just looking at it again, what's happened is in the previous DA, there was no ceiling space between the underside of the slab and the ceiling. And now what they've done is provide 100 millimetres to put lights and stuff in. And visually, what you're reading from the street is actually the parapet.
That's correct. It's a simplified ceiling and roof form plan, and it's been designed in close consultation with the building company. And so that, for want of a better word, it works a lot better now, and it doesn't have extensive parapets for no reason, and it has improved, it has improved ceiling heights.
But the parapet, when you read on the new one, is 83.614, and on the approved was actually 83.7. So,
and that's only in sections, Ms. Small.
Yeah.
There are sections at the front and the rear of the building that are even further lowered to 83.16. And as Mr. Moody suggested, it's the rear of the building as it extends laterally into the view that causes the view loss. And so it's that component that we've lowered substantially from the original approval.
Well,
so if you're looking at section A, as opposed to the previous one, the pergola infill was much higher. And now if you look over that balcony, it's a lot lower.
That's correct. And I think that's quite obvious in figures 4 and 5 as well, where it's reintroduced a view of the Opera House in the bottom part of the Harbour Bridge. There's a clear benefit in our proposal to remove all of the modulation on the roof and the balustrade and the planter boxes, which had the potential to essentially have whatever height plants were chosen by the owners at the time. We see this as a far more sensitive and well-considered height and volume for that neighbour. I fear whatever RL we may have provided, there might have been a suggestion we could have lowered it. We've lowered it to the point that we think provides an appropriate balance, which is what tenacity requires you to do.
Thank you, Mr. Cosnetta. Now, on my speakers list says that Mr. Anthony Boscovitz is available for questions. Mr. Boscovitz, I don't think we need to hear from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, panel. Thank you, panel.
So at the conclusion of the public meeting, we will determine this application.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, my name's James Poulos. I'm the owner across the road. I was given instructions that I was able to speak today.
Sorry, what's your name?
James Poulos. I'm the owner of 175 Military Road across the road. And I was given details today just
Sorry,
around
Mr. Poulos, I misunderstood. I thought that you were available. You had given us another written submission. I didn't realise that you wished to speak. If I'd have known that, I'd have heard you after Mr. Moody. So, so you're from 175 Military Road.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I put in a request to speak, which came back.
All right, don't worry about it. Please go ahead with what you'd like to say.
Thank you, sir. And dear Chairperson and panel members, firstly, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today and also for your time in considering what is a very significant concern to my wife and I. For your background, my name is James Poulos, and together with my wife, I'm the owner of 175 Military Road, which is directly across the road from the development. In addition to the expert report that Mr. Moody has provided, my wife and I have submitted 2 letters, as you have mentioned. And in addition to Mr. Moody's comments today, I wanted to make and reiterate 3 very significant and material points for my wife and I. Point 1, we do not believe what is proposed is an alteration and addition. As the plans show, it is much more than that and much more material. The LK planning report that the home to the north is also much materially higher is not relevant. As to my understanding, this was also not approved by council. Additionally, I struggle to understand how any lowering of the building would not be beneficial to me, and in particular to that of my views of the Opera House, which is why we have asked for height poles and proper view sharing analysis to be done. Secondly, we are not looking to be unreasonable or asking for a refusal here as owners, but merely that appropriate and detailed view analysis is undertaken before any approval is provided, or that a condition is placed on any approval. We respect and understand the need for development within Waverley, and as there are clear DCP guidelines about what can be built, there are very clear guidelines with respect to protecting residents' views of iconic Sydney landmarks like the Sydney Harbour, the Opera House and the Harbour Bridge. As per my submission and the photos that I have submitted, they clearly show we presently have clear and unobstructed views of all 3 Sydney icons. And what is presently proposed today results in a severe and and the most unreasonable loss. Thirdly, secondly, and very significantly, many of the claims in the previous report that resulted in the approved development and council's report to the WLPP today that were used to make a recommendation are factually incorrect, and in particular the comment that the proposed development is considered reasonable as the impact of use is from a study and bedroom. As we have submitted approved plans by council, this is not the case, and as Mr. Moody himself has outlined. At no stage did council seek to clarify any of these assumptions, nor was an offer that we made for an inspection of our property taken up. We also respectfully asked for height poles to be erected by a surveyor to quantify the impact to our view, but again, this was rejected, only for a view analysis to be done by utilising a photograph taken from the house next door to mine at 177 Military Road, which seems grossly unprofessional and inappropriate. Additionally, the applicant's argument in the report that it seems superfluous as no matter what development is constructed will block a portion of the iconic view does not make what is proposed acceptable. As I mentioned earlier, what was constructed at 234 Military Road is also irrelevant given this was not approved by Waverley Council. In conclusion, we are not asking for a refusal, but merely asking for a lowering of what is proposed so that we can enjoy a much better view of of the iconic views that we have. Additionally, we would also like a condition that no rooftop terrace can be introduced at a future date. Thank you very much for your time and listening to me.
Thank you, Mr. Poulos. Are there any questions from the members of the panel for Mr. Poulos?
No, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Poulos.
Thank you all.
As I said, at the conclusion of the public meeting, we will consider this application and notify our decision accordingly. We move then to number, where are we? I think we move to the number 8. And that is 2016 rather than Durrell Street, North Bondi. The first speaker I have is Deborah Prosser-Bafsky. Is she present?
I am.
Ah, good, thank you. You're from number 16 Stewart Street, North Bondi.
Yes,
Yes.
I'm directly behind
Right.
the applicant. And I think you've got all of my things, just a brief.
We have
overview.
an additional submission from you, which was received today. Thank you.
Oh, did. And yes, about the thing, thank you, by the way, of being here and listening to me. It's very stressful for me. I'm going to try and keep unemotional, but it's a very, very stressful thing for my life, as you can imagine. After all the trees we have, firstly, now I'll start again. When I looked up about the super studio versus Waverley, after requesting all the time that some screening plants put at the back so this new development doesn't look straight down into my main living area of my home and my garden, I looked at that again the other day and realised that there's no provision really for you, I don't think, to be able to say for somebody to put up screening on their properties, green screening. And so now that I think that there's no provision whatsoever and nothing has been provided, and we've requested and requested, it also, that property is higher and closer to the boundary than any of the others. I realise that there is an attached property that is what they're basing this submission on. But the way that all the landscaping has been totally removed from the back of the property. There is no provision at all. Even what the amendment has been taken off again, and there's no provision at all of anything there. And more than all of that, because it is so high behind us, because it slopes up the thing and it looks straight into my house, it's taken away that whole livability of my back room, which I've made to live in, to open to my garden. And as I said, I have a disability. I've set up the house so that I can utilise that because I've just retired. So I want to utilise that more than ever. And I'm now asking, can they please, if nothing can be done to block by greenery, which I thought is a really nice way to do it, I would like them to frost both top balconies and both top whole all the doors. They don't have windows. They have doors across the whole back of the top, all of it, but the part that looks into me and my neighbours on each side who I represent here today is, if I could ask for the frosting of the top doors now and the next doors down, which is the bedroom, and then the balcony the balcony as well. I think one of them, he said he would do the balcony. There's also, I was wondering if they could put planter boxes, because already people lean on the balcony, beers in hand, looking over at me, chatting. I had some guys the other day, they were doing that, chatting as I was in the garden, looking straight down into me or straight down into my home where I go to the fridge and do everything like that. I can hear the bell. Have I gone past? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very
really,
much.
hopefully.
Thank you, Mrs. Bafsky. Are there any
Okay, thank you.
questions of Mrs. Bafsky from the panel?
No, Mr. Chair.
No, I don't have any questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Philip Bull, please.
Oh, hello, panel.
You're the planner on behalf of the applicant.
Apologies. Thank you for the opportunity to address the panel. Look, we accept the report and we'd like to thank the officers. We have no concern with it. It seems like the neighbour issue of concern is privacy. And all I would say to that issue is that the concerns are coming from the residences on Stewart Street. There's 8.8 metres setback from our balcony to our rear boundary. And then after that, the setbacks to the rear building lines of the properties on Stewart Street is 16 at Stewart, it's 20 metres plus, 18, it's 18 metres plus, 14 is 20 metres plus, and 20 Stewart is 26 metres plus. So that's well beyond any reasonable setback distance, say for a residential flat building under SEP 65. The elevation in this instance actually gives us a little bit more separation, is that we have horizontal and vertical separation. In terms of Ms. Baskey's concerns, we have amended the plans and we have shown screen planting on the rear boundary, which I think will do quite a lot in terms of any direct views.
It got taken off.
Excuse me.
Oh, sorry.
No, I think
at a time.
I'm sorry.
I think the confusion here was, and I'm not aware of this, apparently there's an allegation that, well, let's say it happened, there were some trees in that rear yard that the owner got rid of. Now they put them back, or there are the proposed plantings in this scheme. In terms of frosting rear windows, we accept a condition frosting the balustrades. We're not really keen on the idea of frosting the windows, because if you actually look at what the rear windows face, they have a really nice district view down to the Bondi base. And so it would be, I think, a bit unfair to frost the windows in this instance. And look, all I would just say generally is that from my experience doing a lot of this sort of domestic planning work, privacy is always a really big issue with neighbours. And I'm not belittling their concerns, but the reality is that in places like Bondi, it's not a big issue. People know how to use curtains. They know how to live in high density environments. These sort of impacts are already there, and people get on with life in these places. And, you know, as I said, privacy is a day-to-day thing in a high density environment. So we think we've done enough in terms of dealing with privacy. We thank the officers for their report. All I would say is that there's a sort of broader urban design issue with this proposal, in that it's completing the works on a semi. We're basically bringing the semi back into symmetry. Obviously, so the applicant can have a nice house. They've got family from Melbourne that stay regularly, so they do need that lower ground floor space. And yes, I'd like to thank the officers, and we endorse the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Ball. Are there any questions from the members of the panel to Mr. Ball?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Ball, at the upper floor level, or just on the floor plan, I'm just not sure whether the proposed deck at the first floor level will extend beyond the line of the deck to the adjoining semi at 14, or whether it will be in line, because I think the drawing of the adjoining semi is incomplete. Would you know that?
Yeah, I see the question. I've got some. The short answer is I'm not quite sure. I can pull up, just give me a sec. I've got some plans that I'll pull up. Okay. I don't know whether I can do this, but the deck that's approved for the 14 is it's a 15 Let's have a quick look. Excuse me.
Maybe we can get the council officers to check
It's a
that.
1500 deep. I mean, I could probably share the screen, but I'm a
Yeah,
when I try and
that's
do things like that,
1500.
something always goes wrong.
This is 2.185.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at the approved plan for 14. It's a 1500 deep deck. It appears to sort of just be behind the approved first, or rather, there's an existing deck to the first floor, so it's just behind that. As I said, the whole purpose of this work, it's the same architect, was to mimic the work that was approved and built on 14. So
your deck won't extend beyond the line of won't go further south than the deck next door.
I don't think so, but I'm a bit sort of put on the spot here and don't want to put my hand on my heart and say yes, but I'm looking at the approved plans for next door, and the plan I'm looking at shows the approved upper level deck for next door being just behind the existing deck for the existing, I suppose,
Quite a lot behind.
first floor deck to our existing semi.
So when you look at your drawings, DA05, you have the upper level proposed first floor, your deck, and then there's the grey next to it. Is that grey representing the extension of the adjoining semi, including their deck?
No.
Or is it their deck would extend further than that grey?
Yes, because what I've seen is if you look at DA06, it has an existing first floor deck that's there, right? When I look at the approved plan for 14, it shows, I'm trying to get that. It shows their upper level. Look.
So when you say,
when I
look at DA06, that's the elevation of this development, and you're saying that there's already a first floor deck on this development.
And the back of our house is a step, so the new upper level deck is obviously well behind the existing first floor deck.
I think you're meaning the ground floor deck.
Yeah, you're right, actually.
Yeah. So you're saying that the ground floor deck, when you look at the adjoining property, its upper level deck comes out to close to that level.
Yes.
The extent of that.
Yeah, yes. Look, it's just, as I said,
all right. I mean, we'll ask the council staff to clarify.
Yeah.
I think you need someone with a scale rule and the plans in front of them that can accurately do it. It's a bit hard doing it on the screen.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
it's a shame we didn't show the extent of 14 on the plan. Anyway.
I mean, if you look at the site plan, I think that's clear that DA01, that shows our deck in line with their upper level deck.
Thank you, Mr. Ball.
Thank you.
If there are no further questions.
Can I ask something?
No, you can't. I'm sorry. We don't.
Okay.
That's part of the protocol is we don't go backwards and forwards.
No, it's okay. But if something was said that didn't...
No, I'm sorry.
We can't. Okay, thank you.
So at the conclusion of the public meeting, which will be shortly, we will adjourn and consider this and the other matters on the agenda and notify our decisions on the council website as soon as may be possible. Thank you to all the speakers today at the meeting. It's very helpful to hear you all. And we will adjourn, and I'll close the public meeting